I'm thrilled to be here. I am going to talk a little bit about the concepts in Vaporized, but I'm going to apply them to a particular topic of interest, which is that the world that we live in seems to be a world of constant change. And wherever I travel in the world, people ask me, how can we be successful? How can we maintain our business or grow our business when the world is changing so fast? That's actually part of the reason why we created Hybrid World. As Tom mentioned, this past week, I've been working here on this week-long festival. There's a workshop for startup companies. There's a public event that is available for families where kids can go to Coding Academy, learn to design games, fly drones, play competitive video games, and so forth. And then there's a tech conference, a 2-day tech conference, and I see some people in the room who were at that conference. Raise your hands if you were at the Hybrid World event at all. So some people, we're not reaching everybody. So part of the reason I'm here is to let you know this program exists. We're putting together this fabulous showcase of technologies. The purpose of the event is to familiarize people in South Australia with the technologies that will shape the future. And so I can't give you that talk. The folks who run that event have asked me not to give the exact same talk. But instead, what I decided to do is talk about something related, a little bit different, but related. And so here we go. What I'd love you to do is give a show of hands as I read off these ideas. So I want to just do a quick survey to get a sense of the room, what people think. There's no wrong answer here. I want you to tell me which you think are going to be which of these will be the most important technology. Which item on this list will be the most important technology in the next 3 to 5 years. And it's okay to vote twice. So first off, how many people think mobile solutions will be very important in the next 3 to 5 years? Really? That's all? So I didn't even see a third of the hands in the room go up. No problem. We'll move to the next one. Cognitive computing. You hear about machine intelligence, artificial intelligence a lot? Yes, okay, great. Quite a few people. I'd say almost half the people in the room think that's important. Bioengineering. So think beyond biotech. Think about things like CRISPR technology allows us to edit genes. Synthetic biology where we can program life. Oh, wow, lots of fans of synthetic biology. Okay, good, great. Me too. I love it. New energy sources, renewable energy. Anyone think that's going to be important in the next 3 to 5 years? Okay, lots of people, more than half. Advanced manufacturing. Here you might think of 3D printing, for instance, or other manufacturing techniques. A lot of manufacturing techniques that allow a person, just one person, to launch a manufacturing company. Fewer hands there. I'd say about a quarter of the room. Cloud computing and cloud computing services, or digital services. Quite a few folks, about half the room, are interested in that. Man-machine hybrids. This is using robotics and artificial intelligence to actually enhance our natural capabilities. So you can think of like those power suits that you might wear. You've seen those. Okay, so some people here, about a third of the room finds that important. And finally, the much overhyped Internet of Things. How many people feel like that's going to be very important in the next 3 to 5 years? Okay, so there we just had about just under half the room. I'd say about 40% of the people in the room. It's not scientific, obviously, this poll. I just wanted to get a sense of where people are at in the room. Now, the reason I'm asking that is because it turns out IBM did this survey this year of about 5,200 executives, mostly chief technology officers or chief information officers at major corporations in 70 countries around the world. And these are the results. This is what the chief technology officers at 5,000 companies tell us. Cloud computing is number 1. Mobile solutions, number 2. That does not surprise me. The mobile phones transform the world, and I'll have a bit to share with you about that. The Internet of Things finally is starting to mature. One of the reasons this idea has taken so long is that it requires lots of pieces to be in place. It requires a lot of mature technology. And candidly, when the idea was first introduced, almost 10 years ago, we didn't have all those pieces in place. So they're gradually coming into place, and now we're starting to see Internet of Things deployments that will change the world around you. But it's just catching up. The other things on that list, advanced manufacturing techniques, things like 3D printing, they work for certain industries. The auto industry has been using 3D printing for a long time, but they haven't yet ironed out the kinks in 3D printing. You probably have done that. If you tried this yourself, there's a long way to go before that's actually going to be something that really makes a material impact in your life in the near term. Bioengineering, new energy, promising, but it's still quite early. I think probably today we might reconsider that alternative energy. I think that's probably growing faster than is reflected here. Then finally, man-machine hybrids at the bottom. So the reason I share this with you is it's always kind of surprising to see what people at the forefront of these technologies actually think themselves. But of course, it's just a prediction, and when we do predictions, we might be wrong. Sometimes we're asked to make predictions without enough information. And so this chart caught my eye. This is an interview, a research that Adobe did with 4,000 respondents, mostly advertising agencies and marketing executives. And they asked them which technologies were going to be important for the marketing industry. Which ones were they most excited about in the next 3 years? And you can see there's agency respondents and then people who are responding from companies, typically brands, brand managers at big corporations. And as you can see, the two things I circled at the top, hyper-personalization and the use of artificial intelligence to drive or plan advertising campaigns and optimize those campaigns. They both involve a kind of artificial intelligence or machine learning system. So those, I would consider those both a version of AI. And the next thing on that list is augmented reality or virtual reality. So this survey was done in February of this year, about 4,000 participants. And what caught my eye here is that this is about artificial intelligence in marketing, and yet that's very early. So people are excited about that, but you can't actually find that many examples. I was just at a Google event 2 weeks ago where they were just introducing a whole suite of AI tools. So here you have an industry that knows this is going to be important, but they don't know much about it, and so they're interested and excited about it, and they can start to make a prediction about whether or not it's going to be important, but they don't actually know how useful this is going to be. And the reason I can tell you that with such certainty is that just 2 months before this was published, there was a different survey done among marketers, and it asked them, which technology are you most unprepared for? The answer is not going to surprise you. It's artificial intelligence in marketing. And the number 2 thing they're unprepared for is virtual reality and augmented reality. So we hear these buzzwords, we hear people talking about them, and we know there's momentum building, but it's all new, and nobody's an expert. And so it's hard for us to predict exactly how that's going to work out. We can be excited about something and still feel like we're unprepared for it. And I think that's the world that we live in, this world of constant change. Very often when I talk to corporations, and I do this all the time, I work with companies all over the world, when I start to introduce these concepts, they'll say, oh yeah, that's disruption. And they act like that's a normal thing. We're kind of conditioned to talking about all digital change as disruption. Ever since Clay Christensen's book, The Innovator's Dilemma, was published 20 years ago, that's the most successful business book in our lifetime and had the most profound impact by far. That's the book where he introduced the concept of digital disruption or disruptive innovation. Ever since that, there have been hundreds and hundreds of books published with the word disruption in them. And so disruption has kind of become, in our mind, it seems to be interchangeable with the idea of just transformation or change. I don't think that's actually such a great idea. I think that's a mistake. I think disruption is actually overrated. And first of all, it's very easy to throw a brick through a window, which is essentially what disruption is about, right? Disrupting an existing business. It takes a lot of time and a lot of ingenuity to figure out how to make a plate glass window. It takes about 5 seconds to break it. Worse, we are suffering from disruption fatigue. So I was talking to television companies about the very real impact that digital video and internet video is having on their business. And one of the people I was talking to said, yeah, that's just disruption. As if it was like saying, yeah, that's just the Black Plague. You're talking about something that could threaten the end of threaten the entire TV industry, and everyone shrugs it off and says that's just disruption. So I think we've heard that phrase so much, we don't take it terribly seriously. And the problem with that is we get kind of innovation blindness. When we tell ourselves, oh, that's just disruption, I don't really need to think about that, I can keep doing what I've been doing, I can do next year what I've been doing for the last 5 years, we get a little bit cozy, we get a little comfortable. We get a little complacent. And I think that's a really dangerous spot to be in. I feel a fierce sense of urgency with these technologies maturing and coming fast, because it means change can come from anywhere. Most companies are unprepared for it. And if we get too comfortable, too cozy, we're not going to see it coming. I think that's a dangerous thing. I think we need a new narrative. I think we need a new way to think about technological change. It doesn't involve disruption as a concept at the core. So here's my narrative. Here's the way I like to think about things. A couple of years ago, one of the biggest advertising agencies in the world, I was working with them on a project, and the CEO came, and I guess he wanted to challenge me. So he said, okay, hotshot, what's the one technological change I need to know that's going to affect all the businesses that we represent at this global agency? And he thought that was a hard question. I said, it's really simple. Think of everything that happened in the information technology industry over the last 40 years. Miniaturization, mobilization, democratization, getting this technology in everybody's hands, making it ubiquitous. Think about that. Think about the way the information technology sector has evolved over the past 40 years, and now begin to apply that to every industry that your agency represents. Any business that has geography involved, whether that's retail or transportation or logistics, is already feeling the impact of this because for the last 10 years, the mobile industry started to change the way those businesses operate. It continues to do that too. Any business where you have labor, repetitive tasks, predictive tasks, predictable tasks, is now experiencing another wave of transformation as robotics begin to replace human labor and farm animals as well. The next phase will be information transforming biology. My friend Dr. Philip Alveida was here this week. He was one of the speakers at Hybrid World, and he's a close friend of mine. I met him when he was running the Biology as Technology division for DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project in Washington, D.C. I thought it was kind of cool that the U.S. military has a program called Biology as Technology, and they're very focused on the idea that we can now program cells like we program a computer. That's going to have massive impact on the agriculture business, life sciences, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, even energy, because most forms of energy, with the exception of solar energy, come from things that grow. So you're going to start to see us be able to reprogram biology at the cellular level. That's a way of information technology transforming biology. Biology used to be a wet science where people were working with beakers, in a laboratory. Today, it's a software business. And something similar is happening in material science. This may take 10 years or more, but we're going to get to a point where we can actually program materials as well. And so the way I look at this is that the information technology sector has begun to absorb all of these other fields. Every industry is an information field. That's the way to look at it, I think. Now, why this is hard for people to grasp is that it's invisible. You can't see this process. We talk about disruptive change. We talk about technological change. You hear about it, you read about it, but you can't actually see it. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, in the Midwest, in the United States. When you go to Cleveland, you don't see robot cars, you don't see startup companies. The only sign you see of disruptive change is a sign in a storefront window that says, going out of business, everything must go. 2017 was a brutal year for retailers in the United States. 10 major chains went out of business. 10,000 stores were closed. More than 100,000 jobs were lost. So we've seen this wave of transformation. I'm sure you've experienced this here in Australia as well, where the retail business is having to be reconsidered from the ground up. And of course, every time a retailer closes its doors forever, it reminds us that not only do we not have the habit of shopping there anymore, we actually probably don't have the habit of using that product that they sell. We've given up that habit. Blockbuster Video used to be the place where you would go to rent videos. First videotape, and then later DVDs, and ultimately Blu-ray discs, and now we just don't use those things anymore. The only time you find a Blu-ray disc is when you go to a flea market or a yard sale someplace, and then you look at those, maybe you find a shoebox of them, and then you realize, I don't have a DVD player at home. I'm a member of the Academy of TV Arts and Sciences in Los Angeles, and every year they send me screener videos so that I can vote on the Emmy Awards for the best TV shows of the year. And they still send us DVDs. And it's funny, I had to go out and buy a used DVD player because I don't have an optical drive in my house anymore. So it's funny, it's not just that we lost the store, we've actually stopped using the product that store sells. This is one very vivid example of that process. But it's actually happening broadly across many sectors. And people refer to this process as dematerialization. Dematerialization into software, or dematerialization into pure information. I have a different word for it. I call it vaporized. I think it's a more elegant term, it's a more fun term. And I mean it quite literally. Something disappears. Something familiar is gone in a puff of smoke. Boom, the next day you don't have it. It's here today, gone tomorrow. And I wrote an entire book on the topic. Now you might think that's a little bit fanciful the way I'm putting it, but every time you use your smartphone, you're vaporizing something. Everybody in this room has a smartphone. And on average, we have about 80 apps on that phone. And each of those 80 apps represents something that used to be sold in physical form in a shop. We just don't need to go to the store for those things anymore. Amazon has vaporized books. Amazon now sells more ebooks than hardbound and paperback books combined. The music industry has been transformed by streaming music services. Today, cloud-based streaming music services represent the only growing segment of revenue in the music business. And it actually is accountable for the only growth in revenue that the music has experienced in the past 10 years. That industry's collapsed to a quarter of its size thanks to digital technology. But now we're not downloading MP3s anymore. We're not doing rip, burn, mix anymore. That's an old habit. Now we stream it. You don't own anything, but you have access to everything. Maps. Remember when you used to get a map when you would go on a trip? I travel a lot, and I used to have the habit of going to the front desk of every hotel to get a map of the neighborhood. You just don't need to do it anymore. The map in your phone is so much better than a paper map. It's in your language. It tells you where you are. It tells you where you're going. It tells you how to get back to the place you came from. And so a whole generation of teenagers are growing up today with smartphones, and they'll never know what it means to be lost in a foreign city. It's kind of extraordinary if you think about it. It's a big shift. The game industry's been transformed as well. I spent a lot of time developing mobile games. In the early days, around 2001, people thought I was crazy because most of my friends were making console games and video games for computers. And they looked at the mobile phone, and they were right. It was a terrible device to play a game on. You know, it's like a little green dot chasing another green dot on a black screen. But I knew that they were going to bring on color screens, and eventually the bandwidth in the network would get better. And I also saw the sheer volume of units that we were shipping in mobile phones. In those days, we were selling 400 million phones a year. Today, we sell 1.5 billion smartphones a year. Today, games on mobile phones represents the largest segment of the $36 billion game industry, and it's growing faster than any other segment. It dwarfs computer games and console games. So it'll continue to be the largest segment until it crowds out of those other two segments. But that's not all. It's not just a novel distribution technique to distribute a game over the air to a phone. That distribution technique brought a new business model because we learned very quickly that people wouldn't just download blindly. They wanted to try it before they buy. So you had to give them a free taste or a free sample or a free level. Today, a game like Candy Crush, you can play 55 levels of Candy Crush and never pay a dime. So this idea of playing for free so that the consumer can experience the entire product and they decide when they want to convert to a paid player, that's a novel concept. And that's ricocheted through the entire game industry, and now that's how all games are presented and sold. And it's caused us to completely change the way we design our products. Because if you're going to design a game that people can play for free, you have to build some mechanism into that game that's going to cause some percentage to convert. Otherwise, you've got a terrible business. So we've actually got a new distribution model, which brought a new business model, and that, in turn, brings a new way to design the product. So you can start to see this is changing. This is rippling through the entire industry. And, of course, it's also happening to television. So it's not just that we don't buy DVDs anymore, like I mentioned a moment ago. Sure, we don't buy physical media anymore, but it's more than that. In the old days, if you wanted to be in the TV business, you had to put a satellite in space or pull a copper cable through the ground or buy a broadcast station and some spectrum. But today, those days are over. Anyone who wants to launch a video service today can put it up in a weekend. A cloud-based streaming video service is easy to launch. Today, there are more than 200 cloud-based video services available in the United States. But this is not a phenomenon that's limited to the US. It's actually happening in every part of the world. Because it's so cheap to launch, you can launch a local video streaming service. And so thousands and thousands of over-the-top streaming video services are being launched in every corner of the world. So this transformation is quite broad. When I say we're vaporizing things, what I mean is that we're replacing physical goods with software. Invisible software available on demand at the touch of an icon. And this process is not limited to maps or media or television. We're actually replacing physical things, products that you used to buy in a store. Think about your smartphone again. In the past 10 years, your smartphone has absorbed the functionality of more than 25 consumer electronics devices. And for the companies that manufacture consumer electronics, this has been a devastating blow. Remember those Japanese giants? We used to call it Japan Inc. in the 1980s. Their electronics industry was going to destroy the electronics industries in Australia and America. That happened, but now those companies themselves are suffering tremendously because they've experienced double-digit decreases in the sales of their products, things like MP3 players, video cameras, video players, and portable navigation systems. In the same interval, in the last 10 years, the sales of smartphones has increased 500-fold. I believe that everything that can be vaporized will be. I believe everything that can be replaced by software will be. But let me be clear about that, because sometimes people misunderstand me. What I'm not saying is that everything will be vaporized. That's what I'm not saying. We still need shoes and food and clothes, but the way we get those things is changing. And it's quite interesting the way it's changing. So I mentioned retail is suffering from tremendous losses right now. There's no question about that. I'm sure that's a process that's happening here. Retailers aren't stupid. They see what's happening. Consumers come into their stores armed with smartphones, and they're doing comparison shopping right from the aisle in the shop. And so retailers are doing their best to bring digital technology into the store. They're loading their stores up with beacons and sensors and all sorts of digital technology in order to keep that customer happy, in order to engage the interest of that customer. It's kind of a rearguard action to defend a crumbling business model. I still believe that retail is in the process of being vaporized, at least transformed by this. What we're looking at here is a picture of the Randall Park Mall. When I was a child in Cleveland, Ohio, this was the largest shopping mall in the world. And we used to go there. It was like a giant city. And we get a lot of snow in Cleveland in the winter, so it was a fun place to visit in the darkness of the winter. But a few years ago, they got crushed by e-commerce, and this place went out of business. It just wasn't cool to go to shopping malls anymore. So it went out of business, and then in kind of a ironic twist of fate, this abandoned shopping mall got acquired by Amazon, who tore it down and built a colossal warehouse for e-commerce fulfillment. More than 200 shopping malls in the United States have now been replaced by either data centers or e-commerce fulfillment centers. So there's poetic justice somehow. We're recycling the old marketing and retail environment and turning it into the basis for the new economy. When I walk around in a shop, I always look at things that are getting vaporized, what's getting replaced by software. And you probably noticed that we're starting to replace the checkout clerk, that person that scans your products at the cash register. That person's been replaced by a robot. And we're seeing these roll out all over the world. McDonald's is doing this in Europe, and they're starting to roll this out in the United States, so they don't have human tellers or human checkout clerks anymore. The funny thing about this is people don't like these services. Do you like them? Do you have them here? People kind of hate it, right? Sometimes you have to scan several times. I don't like it because I always feel like I'm working for the store. I feel like I should get a discount or get a coffee break every 15 minutes or something. It's like I'm taking on the job of being the teller. So Amazon did something really interesting recently. Amazon did a survey of people who shop in retail, and they asked them what they hate the most about shopping. People definitely don't like the parking lot. They don't like looking for a parking space. But the number one thing people dislike about shopping is standing in line at the checkout counter. And in particular, they hate those robot tellers. They hate doing the job. They don't like the line, but they really don't like being a checkout teller. Amazon loves to torment retailers. So they decided they should get back into the retail business and reinvent it in their own image. And they created this thing called Amazon Go. And using a combination of machine learning and machine vision and the fact that more than 100 million Americans are members of their Prime subscription shopping service, their proposition is simple. You walk into the shop and you pick up the merchandise you're interested in, the robots keep an eye on you, and you just walk out of the store. And the charge appears in your credit card as an Amazon Prime charge. In fact, they're marketing it this way. They're calling it just walk out. That's the sign on the front. No lines at the checkout counter. The funny thing about this is when they opened this store in Seattle, they opened this test store, there's no lines at the checkout counter, but it turns out there's a line around the block to get into the store. So people were waiting in line. They have the experience of not being in line. In a way, Amazon's late to the game. They're a little bit late to the game because things like Square have literally vaporized the shop entirely. You can now be a merchant. You know, you've seen people who drive taxi cabs using Square. So anyone can be a merchant without a point of sale, without a cash register at all. What's happening with these services is they're annihilating the constraints of time and space. Those physical constraints that limited how many transactions we could do or where a retail shop could be. My favorite example of this comes from South Korea. This is a couple of years old, but I really love this example. This is a company called Home Plus, and they were the #2 retailer in South Korea. They got acquired by Tesco, the UK shopping chain. And Tesco gave them a tough goal. They said, we want you to be the #1 retailer in South Korea. They said, yes, let's go. And they got all gung-ho about that. But then they discovered, to their dismay, they couldn't get any retail outlets. There were no locations available. If you've been to Seoul or Incheon, you know that those two cities have been woven together. They're just a dense conurbanation, and every retail shop is full. There's no space for stores. You can't add new stores. So they're like, well, how can we grow? We have this aggressive target. We're supposed to be #1. We have to open more stores. So they had a good idea. They said, let's bring the store to where the customers are. So what you're looking at is not a retail shop in South Korea. This is a subway station in Seoul. Now, in Seoul, Korea, they're a little smarter than we are in New York City. In New York, we have open subway tracks that you can fall in. In Korea, they put glass panels up. And so the people from Home Plus notice that you have a lot of people standing around staring at a glass panel. Why not cover those glass panels with life-size photographs of the products? And the young man in the foreground, he's using his phone to scan a product and make a purchase. And when he arrives at his destination, there'll be someone to greet him with a shopping bag with his goods. This experiment was so successful, Home Plus became the #1 retailer. They hit their goal. And the parent company, Tesco, copied the format. And what you're looking at here is not a retail shop in London. This is a train station in central London, the Waterloo train station. And again, they wrapped the columns in that train station with life-size photographs. And you can see the woman in the foreground. She's using her phone to scan and make a purchase. And when she arrives at her destination, when she alights from the train and her destination, there'll be someone to greet her with the shopping goods that she purchased. Of course, today, now, we can dispense with the pop-up shop altogether. Services like Instacart make it possible for people to say, I don't want to deal with the store or the parking. I'm just going to text in the products that I want and let someone else do the shopping for me and just bring me the goods. And if you don't know what you want, there's also a customer that has no clue what they want. Well, there's another service available for you, meal kits. If you haven't tried these services yet, they're fantastic. They make everyone feel like a gourmet. I'm not a good cook, but I love using meal kits. They bring you exactly the right portion. So you get like a quarter of a carrot or a quarter of an onion or an ounce of some herb or just a little bit of a spicy sauce that goes with the vegetable. And it makes you feel like a rock star when you cook these dishes. But in fact, you're not really doing anything. They're making huge vats of the stuff, and then they package it up and ship it out. So these meal kits are great. It's easy to prepare. You feel like a cook. I describe this process as the software-defined society because what's happening is that there's a digital service behind every single one of the examples I just gave you. And typically, the rules that govern that service are what govern the commerce. They govern our behavior. And that's starting to reshape the world. It's starting to cause us to expect services to be more flexible, more responsive, anticipate our needs, respond to what we're looking for, in some ways predict what we're looking for, or even prescribe what we should be looking for, like the meal kit example I just gave you. This is a chance to reinvent the way business works. And I think this is a very, very, very exciting time. Because almost every business can be reinvented as a digital service. It just takes a little bit of imagination. It's remarkable to me how little imagination some companies have, and I'll show you a couple examples of what I mean in a moment. But first I want to tell you about this. So in the last 2 years, your smartphone has gotten a little bit smarter. It started to absorb all the stuff in your wallet or your purse. Things like credit cards and identity cards and those key cards that give you access to a building, the boarding pass that you use to get on an airplane. All of those have been replaced by an app in the phone. And this is causing some companies to change the way they do business. So this is a great example. 2 years ago, right when I was writing Vaporizes, it had just come out. I just finished writing, actually. It was coming out. And I was in San Francisco, and I stopped at the W Hotel. And when I checked in, they gave me this key card. And I liked it so much, I took a picture of the front and the back. The front says, "My days as a key are numbered." Now, I love that, because it's not a key. It's a card. It's a metaphor for a key. But you're like, okay, fine, we'll go with that. We're not going to have key cards anymore. And then you flip the card over, and on the back, it tells me to sign up for the SPG app. SPG is the holding company that owns W and a number of other hotel chains. Why would I want to sign up for their app? Oh, because, they say, if you order your room, if you book your room through their app, we're going to do something remarkable. When you come in from the hotel chain, when you come in from the airport, and you're arriving at the hotel, you can skip the front desk and go straight to your room. You can actually select your room on the app, and skip the front desk, go straight to your room, and using NFC, near field communication, you just tap the door with your smartphone and it recognizes you. And the door opens up automatically. You don't need a key card at all, just the app and your phone. So they vaporized the key card, if you will. But you start to think about that, you go, well, that's kind of a cool idea, and I can imagine where they're going next. It won't just be that the room recognizes me and opens the door, but it'll recognize me and then put my Netflix videos on the TV set, or put my Spotify playlist on the stereo, or reset the AC in the room to the temperature that I like. I can reset the AC in that room when I'm coming in from the airport, so it's nice and cool the way I like it, or nice and hot if I like that. So what they're starting to do is take a hotel, a building, and turn it into a platform for digital services, which is kind of a cool idea. This idea was introduced just a couple of years ago. Now SPG has rolled it out across 13 hotel chains. And they have to do one hotel at a time because they have to change all the locks in the hotel. So they're not doing it overnight. They're doing it a gradual process. But now you'll see examples of this across all of their different hotel chains. Now, there's a couple of reasons why they have to do this. One is these online travel agencies, OTAs, are eating into the hotel business. So if you've ever booked something on Booking.com or Hotels.com, that's a great deal for you. It's a lousy deal for the hotel chain. They don't like those OTAs very much. And also, those OTAs, they have a relationship with you. So if you use Booking, I use Booking.com all the time. I have a great relationship with them, but I'm pretty indifferent as to which hotel chain. So I'm losing my loyalty to the hotel chain. I have a loyalty with this online travel agency. They want to bust that. They want to break the grip of those OTAs and reassert their relationship with the customer. So this app gives me a reason to engage directly with the SPG chain. And I like it because I get more personalization out of it. So I would actually do that. So that's one reason why they had to change. But there's another reason. There's an unavoidable reason. Traditional companies only change when there's a threat. And the threats often come from unexpected quarters. SPG had no choice because Airbnb is out there today. Airbnb doesn't own any hotels. They don't own any real estate. And they have less than 1% of the staff on staff that the Hilton hotel chain has. And yet they're worth more than the Hilton hotel chain. In fact, Airbnb is worth more than all hotel chains in the world, with the exception of Marriott and SPG. What Airbnb has is 1 million properties in a database in 65,000 cities. They have far more properties under management available in their service than any other company. And so if you get in the habit of using Airbnb, you find you can get a really cool experience. You can stay on a boat in Amsterdam. You can stay in a church in Bordeaux. People are posting unique and interesting experiences, and they're discovering there's a different customer, somebody that doesn't want a predictable hotel room like any other cookie-cutter hotel in the world, but people are going to a different city. They want to have a different, unique experience. And so Airbnb is in the experience business, and they're really doubling down on this. Airbnb has hired experienced experts in every one of the cities where they have a presence. So they're shopping a completely different customer, a completely different thing. It's a digital service, and again, this database, these 4 million properties, it's actually now 4 million. These 4 million properties that are in their database, that database gets smarter every time someone uses it. It's a proprietary data asset that grows and gets richer with use. That's their competitive advantage. So the traditional hotel chains had to rethink themselves. They had to come up with a new way to become an experience-based digital service in response to this upstart. So I believe that the information economy is starting to reshape the real world. Familiar things are disappearing. Brand new services that we never could have even imagined a few years ago are emerging, and they're changing us as well. We're starting to change in that process. Now, you hear this a lot when you talk to companies about their future plans. Sometimes the leaders will say, oh, every company in the future will be a software company, right? You've heard that. I think that's probably true. But that doesn't mean every company is going to be successful as a software company. Most of them are going to fail. This is hard to do. Traditional manufacturing companies are terrible at software. Electronics companies are terrible at software. Auto manufacturers are terrible at software. It's very hard to reconceive of a manufacturing business as a software business. So it's easy to say that, it's hard to do. New media requires that we think in different ways. As Tom mentioned to you, my background was in television. And then after television, I got into video games. And then from video games, I got into online services, and then mobile games, and online games, and then online education. But media has always been at the core of my experience. About 15 years ago, I got a call from a bank, and they said, we'd like you to come in and give us some advice. And I said, a bank? They said, yeah, we have our strategic retreat. All of our branch managers, all of our managers around the world are going to get together. Can you come in and tell us what you know? I said, I don't know anything about the bank business. And they said, you don't need to know about our business. We know our business. We need to know what you know about the media business, because when we go on the internet, we turn into a media company. We don't know anything about that. And it's true. All the dynamics that have reshaped the music industry and the game industry and the music industry are starting to reshape the manufacturing businesses, the financial services, insurance businesses. All of those kinds of companies are becoming digital media businesses. And they all need to change their attitude. But most companies suffer from blind spots. Most companies cannot see this. They're so focused on their current business, or they're maybe looking in the rearview mirror and they're focused on their past business, and they'll do everything they can to throw the future under the bus in order to preserve that old business from the past. But they have blind spots. There's things they cannot see. The smartest executives that I help are the ones who say, look, you don't have to tell me about my competition. I know who my competitors are. I need you to show me the people on the periphery that I can't even see, the people coming out of that digital woodwork who are going to undermine our business. When I talk to television companies, and I do it a lot, I show them this picture and I say, what do you see? And they say, well, we see 3 screens. I say, okay, give me a little more to work with. And they say, we see a big TV screen and 2 small screens. But don't worry, we've got a distribution deal with Netflix, so we're on all 3 screens. I say, right. Your rivals in the digital media business, when they look at this picture, they see something you don't see. What they see is an invisible layer of software that links all 3 screens together. And that invisible layer of software allows us to develop brand new experiences that were hitherto unimaginable. New ways to browse and discover and find content and monetize it. New ways to organize content, manage it, playback on your own terms, control that content. And new ways to share and talk about content and promote it so that your audience can become your biggest promoter, your marketing vehicle. If you think about the success of Amazon Video and also Netflix and other OTT services, this is where their success came from. It didn't come from content initially. It came from delivering a better service. Their success came from understanding that invisible layer of software and developing those services around the content. It's not a content story. The ability for people to control media on their own terms is a transformative concept in the media industry. It's completely shifted control away from programmers, broadcasters, media studios, and it's put the control in the hands of the consumer. It's those invisible software that made that possible. So new media causes us to think in different ways. This example isn't limited to the media industry. In 2014, I worked with Ford Motors on a visioning project, and I worked with their strategic planners and their design teams. And so we looked at a picture like this. I said, what do you see? And they start talking about build quality and the profile and the way you look at the car and the reflective surface on the car. And then they talk about the interior and the leather and the handling and the steering wheel. And they talk about the motor and the performance characteristics, all the physical attributes. Of course that's what they see. They're motorheads. If you work for 20 years in the auto industry, you work there because you like driving cars. But what they don't see is what their competitors see. Competitors see an invisible layer of software. And that makes possible services like Uber and Lyft, things that make it unnecessary for us to purchase a car or even lease a car. You can have a car on demand. Why own a car when you can get transportation on demand with the touch of a button? So again, all the new value that's been created in the auto industry has been created in this invisible layer of software that the manufacturers themselves cannot see. Now, someone in the audience is going to say, well, hang on a second, what about Tesla? I will submit to you that Tesla is not winning based on build quality. Their build quality is akin to a Hyundai. Tesla is winning because they've got an invisible layer of software that networks all their cars together. I have a friend who drives a Tesla in Manchester, in the UK. And one part of his neighborhood, there's one part of his drive where he goes under a railroad trestle. And that part of the road is really bumpy. So with a Tesla car, you can shift out of the regular transmission mode. You can go into sort of a high transmission mode for bumpy roads. And so he got in the habit of just shifting into that transmission mode whenever he got to that part of the road so he could go across that bumpy section. And he said one day he got to that part of the road and the car automatically raised itself up. And he said, wow, that's cool. But what's even cooler is every subsequent Tesla that drives on this stretch of road will automatically shift up into that mode. The cars learn from each other. That's an invisible software layer that adds value to the driving experience of being a Tesla owner. You can probably get where I'm going in this section. So if you talk to real estate people and you show them a building like this, you say, what do you see? They'll start talking about square footage and the amenities of the building, et cetera, et cetera. But if you talk to a company like WeWork, they see something you don't see. They see the building as a platform for digital services. WeWork is using machine learning and data analytics to improve how the office space is used. And they're comparing one floor plan with another using digital services. They actually they use sensors to track how people are using those workspaces. And as a result, they're able to drive significantly higher yield per square foot than normal real estate investment companies. And as a result of that, WeWork is valued at a valuation that is astronomical compared to most real estate businesses. And that allows WeWork to borrow money at a level that no other company can. And if you've looked at WeWork lately, they are saddled with a debt load that is extraordinary. But they've got this incredible multiple on earnings, so they actually can afford to manage that until there's a crisis. So let's hope that the economy stays good. WeWork will stay in business. Otherwise, don't buy that stock. Steer clear. But anyway, WeWork is actually kind of an interesting company because they see real estate as a platform for digital services. You can apply this concept to many other businesses. My favorite example comes to us from the lighting business. The Edison light bulb. There are more than 4 billion in the United States. 4 billion sockets. Hasn't changed a lot in 100 years. Essentially, it's the exact same socket that Thomas Edison designed in the 1890s. But now Nora Horwitz from the Natural Resource Defense Council said we've seen more innovation in the past 5 years than in the past 125 years in electrical lighting. You see, what happened in the United States is that President George Bush signed into law something actually quite good. People don't know he did something good, but I'll tell you what it is. He signed a law that said that we have to reduce the energy usage of light bulbs. He didn't say how, so they didn't prescribe a technology. He just issued a target, and the lighting industry had to meet it. So they could do it with more efficient incandescent lights. And in fact, many manufacturers have come out with more efficient incandescent bulbs, a new generation of incandescent bulbs. The first generation of products you probably saw are these CFL, compact fluorescent lights. And they had two defects. They were more expensive than incandescent bulbs. And then when you try to throw them away, it turns out you can't just throw them in the garbage because they're actually quite bad. They're very polluting. They're not a great product. But then in the past 5 years, we've started to see LEDs come out in the market. Now, LEDs are interesting. These LEDs look like regular light bulbs, right? They have that familiar, iconic Edison bulb shape. But what's cool about an LED is that LED is not using a chemical process. So it doesn't actually need that glass bulb around it. An LED is a little computer. And all the characteristics of the information technology industry that I've been describing to you, they apply to lighting as well. Because there's no chemical process, you don't need that vacuum seal. And so you can print LEDs on flexible displays. You can print them on bendable things that could be folded up. You can put LED lights in different places, unexpected places, and you can program them like a computer to have different colors. And so we're starting to see lighting used by architects and designers in ways that were hitherto unthinkable. Lighting as a service, software as a service. It's starting to change the way cities look. And because these things are flexible and waterproof, we're starting to see lights in places we would never otherwise expect it to be, previously unthinkable. Weaving light into fabric so it shows up in places you would never expect. Lighting as a fashion accessory. Lighting on a shopping bag, on a purse, on moving things, bicycles, skateboards, motorcycles. And it's programmable. So if you've seen Philips Hue, you know there are apps, right? They have a whole suite of apps. Philips Hue is a light as a platform for apps. And people build apps, and you can program, and you can design, you can do Christmas colors and so forth, your favorite sports team's colors, all that kind of thing, if you like that sort of thing. Now, you might think that's kind of a gimmick. Fair enough. Scale it up, and it's awesome. In city after city, we're starting to see LEDs used in transformative ways. We're changing the city landscape. We're changing it with software. Lighting is software. New York Times has been completely reinvented with dynamic lighting displays. They're no longer static. You can program them. It's a software-defined lighting system. Perhaps the best example comes to us from the Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world, 1/4 mile tall. They wired it up with 75,000 LEDs. It's now the world's largest video display, and it can be seen from miles. This process has introduced an entirely new kind of architecture. They call it media architecture. So an entirely new discipline in the architecture field. Designing buildings that have motion displays, programmable displays, televisions that we live in, video that we can wear. LEDs don't cast off heat the way a traditional light bulb works. Excuse me. So it's cool enough for you to hold it. You won't get burned. You can weave it into fabric. You can even wrap your car with them. Televisions that we drive. My message is simple. As goods become information intensive, they begin to lose the characteristics of a physical product, and they start to take on the dynamics of a digital service. That's so important, I'm going to say it again, because I really want this message to sink in. As goods become information intensive, they shed the characteristics of a physical product, and they adopt the dynamics of a digital service. And you can apply this to every industry you can imagine. You're probably thinking, well, wait, you just showed us light bulbs and lighting and architecture light and so forth. Where's the digital service? Here it comes. Philips, the big light manufacturer in the Netherlands, teamed up with an Italian carpet maker called Adesso, and they found a way to weave LED filaments into carpets. And they've created something brand new, illumination as a service. Responsive lighting that's woven into the carpet. So when you're a visitor in a building, when they give you one of those badges or passes, as you pass through the building, a lighted pathway will appear in the carpet and guide you to the office or the meeting room that you're going to. Or perhaps you've got an app for an airline or an airport, and you have a connecting flight. The carpet in that airport will light up for you personally and guide you to your connecting flight gate. Or in an emergency situation, you can immediately have illumination in the floor to guide everybody to safety outside the building. Lighting as a service. Now, with the advent of the Internet of Things, we're finally starting to have all the pieces in place where the Internet of Things will actually work. And everything that can be connected will be connected. That means that we're going to be able to create digital services with just about everything that's connected. And to me, it's a golden age for a golden opportunity for reinvention. My friends in the room know I love to think about cars, and I love to think about them in ways that are different than the way car manufacturers think about them. I think of the car as a node on a network. You may think that's kind of a strange way to think about a car. Cars are important. You know, if I asked you to name the most important product of the 20th century, it would be interesting to get what people think from that. 2 days ago, Professor Genevieve Bell was on stage, and she said that the most important product of the 20th century was light, was illumination, electric illumination. I think that's a great candidate for it. I think it's actually different. I would disagree with her. I think it's the automobile. I think the automobile changed everything 100 years ago. It's not just Henry Ford's innovation of the assembly line. That's certainly a big change, right? The introduction of the assembly line meant that cars weren't handmade. It meant you could manufacture cars at a price point that the workers who made them could afford to buy their own car, and that was by design. And of course, that concept, the assembly line, spread through all of industry. So it gave us the great consumer economy that we have today. And largely, the story of our cities in the past 100 years is the story of the shift from an agrarian society to a consumer society. We're not all producers, but we're all consumers, and we're all beneficiaries of Henry Ford's assembly line. So that was an important innovation in the auto industry, but that's not the only reason cars are important. Cars are also important because they transformed our cities. 100 years ago, you could walk across any city in an afternoon. If you go to a town in Europe, you'll notice that there's really 3 towns in every big city in Europe. There's the medieval town, right? It's usually an irregular pattern. It's usually around the river. And you can sort of see where the city walls used to be because they usually put a ring road around that. And then there's the part of the town where the railroad could come. But that came much later. That came in the 1800s. And so they couldn't pull the railroad all the way into the city. So that really dense, kind of street part where the crooked streets are, that was the medieval city. And then you've got this grid-like city. Think of like Barcelona. You've got this grid-like part outside of the medieval core. And that's usually where the railroad is, because they brought the railroad as close as they could to the dense city, and then a new city grew up, and that's a city that's based on a grid. And then there's a third city, and it's Car City, and Car City goes for 60 miles. I live in Los Angeles. You can drive for 100 miles in Southern California. You never leave the city. It's bewildering to people who've never been there before. They're like, where's the center? There isn't a center. It's a series of centers. They connect together. Where's the natural wilderness? There isn't any. We paved it. It's all roads, thanks to Henry Ford. The automobile also gave us the oil economy. 51 cents of every dollar that's spent on oil is spent on gasoline or petrol that goes inside of a motor vehicle of some sort. And that's not all. The automobile changed the way we eat. It really did. I know, that sounds crazy, but think about this. There was no fast food in the horse and buggy era. There was never a time in the day and age of carriages where someone was flipping burgers with the expectation that someone was going to pull their horse up and hop out and ask for a burger. The automobile has changed our lives in uncountable numbers of ways. And yet it's about to change again. Because there's one fact about owning an automobile. You either had to buy it or lease it if you wanted to drive around. But now we have software as a substitute for ownership, this expectation that I can get transportation no matter where I am just by touching an icon on my phone. Yes, of course I'm talking about services like Uber, Lyft, Didi, and so forth. They really have been transformative in ways that are just starting to sink into people's consciousness. They didn't set out to destroy the auto industry. They set out to destroy the taxi industry. When Travis Kalanick and Garrett Camp were at a conference in Paris, it's a cool conference. It was held on the outskirts of Paris in an industrial part of town. It's definitely a cool place to hold a conference, but at nighttime, you come out of the conference, it was pouring rain, it's the winter, there were no taxis in sight. And Travis said to Garrett, there ought to be an app where you can just call a taxi. I can't believe we have to figure out how to get a taxi out here in the middle of nowhere. Garrett went back to his hotel room and started coding it. The next morning he showed it to Travis, and that was how Uber got started. They literally built an app overnight. And they said, this is a cool idea. We should make a business here. And what they set out to conquer was literally the worst consumer experience on the planet. Think about a taxi in New York. How many people have been to New York and gotten a cab? Lots of people. Okay, great. It's a miserable experience. It really is. Particularly at 4 o'clock when they all go on off duty. You're trying to get to the airport and it's like they're all off duty. Who designed that system at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, in the middle of the day? It's crazy. The seats are broken, springs are sticking out, they're dirty, the drivers don't speak English, I don't know what language they speak, they don't know where they're going, they're reckless, it's sort of dangerous. You're getting a car with this rickety thing, they run them 24 hours a day, they don't really maintain them very well. It's a terrible consumer experience. Think about it, there's no other product that requires their customer to stand outside in the freezing rain or pouring snow and try in vain to flag down a taxi. Imagine that is literally the worst consumer experience. So when you're launching a digital app, it's very good to focus on the absolute worst experiences. Those are the ones where people are most likely to switch over to your app, even at the early stage. Of course, we've all used Uber. You know how it works. You're in a place, and you decide you need to get to a different place. You whip out your phone. You touch an icon on the phone. You tap in a destination. A few minutes later, a car pulls up, and it's all for you. You don't have to fight for it. You don't have to run over there and hope somebody doesn't cut in front of you. It's yours. You don't have to speak the language. You don't have to tell the driver where you're going. You don't even have to handle foreign currency. You just jump in the back seat, and when you get to your destination, you hop out. You don't have to worry about parking. That's the driver's job. He's going to go pick somebody else up. Transportation as a service. The idea is so good, it's been cloned in many different countries. So Uber faces competition in many parts of the world. Ola in India, Lyft in the United States, Didi in China, BlaBlaCar and 400 other competitors in Europe. It's a very lively sector. But until recently, the auto industry didn't take this seriously. So back to my meeting with Ford in 2014, I was talking about these services. I said, this is important stuff. And they said, why is this important stuff? It's like the taxi cab. They're going to buy cars too. No problem. I said, no, no, no. If a generation grows up with the expectation that they don't need to own a car, they can get transportation without purchasing a car, they're not going to have the habit of buying a car. When I grew up in Ohio, every kid who was 16 was dying to get their hands on a car because that meant freedom and liberty. You could get out of the house. You could go on a date. All that stuff. Now you have 12-year-olds and even younger, 11-year-olds in Los Angeles who use Uber Pool to go on play dates together, go cruise around Los Angeles together. Their parents don't even know. Well, actually, their parents do know where they are because they can see where they are on the app. The kids have freedom, flexibility. They can actually start to use the city the way they want to use it. Auto industry doesn't understand this. If you delay your initial purchase of an automobile, That means you're going to buy fewer cars over the entire lifetime. They finally started to wake up when in 2015, Uber raised money at a private valuation of $62 billion, which was greater than the public market cap of General Motors or Ford. All of a sudden, the auto industry woke up and realized we need to get into this. This is an existential crisis. And what's really interesting is that even dinosaurs can dance. Every one of the major auto companies shifted on a dime and got into the car sharing and ride sharing service very, very quickly. GM invested in Lyft, Toyota invested in Uber. Ford actually bought a car sharing company called Chariot. I think I just read today that General Motors did as well, or some major car company just bought another one, a car sharing service today. So the auto industry is learning to change its story a little bit. Funny thing about Uber is everybody hates it. Have you noticed that? Wherever you go in the world, people hate Uber. They really do. You can be in India, you can go to China. Whenever I go to France, they're having a riot. Often it's about Uber, turning cars over and burning them in the streets. I mean, protesting in the streets is like a national sport in France, so you can't take it too seriously. But this reaction against Uber is visceral. And it's not just taxi owners who don't like Uber. Of course, they don't like it because it's an existential threat for them. But something about Uber bugs us all, right? It just sort of bothers us. It grates. It's not just that the management there is a bunch of bullies who are kind of a magnet for bad press. That's true. That's true. But I think the problem with Uber is that they're imposing digital rules on the real world. And we don't like that. We're not ready for that yet. The folks at Uber look at the world and they say, hey, we should do commerce the same way it works in the digital world. So dynamic pricing is something that happens every time you shop. If you go to Amazon and you're driving a Macintosh computer, you're going to see different prices than if you're driving a cheap PC. Dynamic pricing. It's normal in the digital environment. It's illegal in a shop, a physical shop in the real world. But it's normal in the digital environment. Uber introduced surge pricing. And even somebody who's a fan like me hates surge pricing. You come out of a concert and it's raining, everybody wants an Uber, the price is 3x or 4x. And that's happened to me. Sometimes you have to pay $100. But sometimes you really need to get somewhere and it's worth it. I don't know. You have to make that decision. What Uber's trying to do, they realize that the alternative to not enough taxis isn't to keep the price the same. That means there just won't be any taxis available. But if you crank the price up, you get a market effect. Now new drivers will come. They'll get off their seat at home, they'll get off the couch, stop watching television, and get in their cars and serve customers. So dynamic pricing is there to serve people, but it bugs us, right? Something about Uber doesn't fit well, doesn't feel well. In almost every city where Uber does business, they've been sued by city government because there are taxi and limousine commissions that govern car services, livery services, limousines, and so forth. And Uber just blithely ignores those things and launches its service. And so in every country they've been to, they've been slapped with sanctions. They've been fined. They've been hauled in court. Uber says, well, why do we have these taxi and limousine commissions? They exist in every city in the world. Why do we have them? Oh, that's how we make sure the quality of the service is there. Before there were taxi and limousine commissions, back in the 1920s, there were unscrupulous drivers who would do unscrupulous things. And so the taxi and limousine commission is there to ensure quality. And Uber says, really? It's 2018. And you think your army of inspectors is somehow going to maintain the quality? Just look at the cabs in New York City again. Just think about that. Don't think that service is working so well anymore. Uber says, we have a new idea. We're replacing laws and regulations by empowering the consumer with a 5-star rating. We're going to let the customer themselves tell us if it was a scrupulous driver or not, or an efficient ride, or a good service or not. And what you might not know is it's actually a two-way reputation marketplace that they built. Not only are you rating the driver when you ride an Uber, the driver's also rating you. Now, looking at the folks in this room, I assume you're pretty good passengers. But if you're somebody who stumbles out of a nightclub at 4 in the morning and you throw up on your way home in the back of an Uber, guess what? The next time you get out of that nightclub, you might not find any Uber drivers that want to pick you up. So what they've done is they've created a marketplace for behavior, and they're incentivizing good behavior. If an Uber driver's ranking gets below 4.5 stars, they get a warning, and if it goes down to 4, they get fired. But also the drivers get to decide what kind of passengers they pick up, so they don't have to respond if the person has a low rating. This is a very powerful concept. Obviously, it's a very challenging concept. Uber's also using software to replace management. And this is where it gets really creepy when you look at their business. You know, they haven't vaporized the car, but they have vaporized the dispatcher. You know that voice, that disembodied voice that used to say, attention car number 6, there's a pickup on Lexington Avenue and 43rd Street. That's gone, right? Now it's an app that tells you what to do. And whenever I ride an Uber, I always talk to the drivers because I love to talk to them, no matter what country. And they're like little entrepreneurs, micro-entrepreneurs. And I love talking to them. And so you say, how do you like being an Uber driver? And they always say, I love it. I say, why do you love it? Nobody tells me what to do. I'm an independent business person. Oh, cool. Okay, great. So how do you find your passengers? Well, the app tells me where the passenger is. Okay, cool. And when you pick that passenger up and you drop them off, how do you get paid? Well, the app knows. The app knows the passenger got delivered, and then I get paid. I'm like, okay, so you work for an app. They go, no, I'm an independent business person. I'm like, well, if your boss is an app, you're probably a biological robot, and you're the next thing that's going to get vaporized. And Uber's done this. They've been at the forefront of automating the automobile experience. They're pushing this. The economics of their business depend on it. Right now, 80 cents of every dollar that Uber earns is spent on the driver. With a fully autonomous vehicle, that will drop down to 20 cents. So in order for them to be profitable, they need robot vehicles. That's why they're pushing so fast and so furious. Last fall, they launched a robot taxi service in Pittsburgh on an experimental basis. But what's interesting about that is Uber wasn't the first to do it. Actually, the first service that was launched was done by MIT in conjunction with Nutonomy in Singapore. And Singapore is a great city to do this in because the city is so tightly wired. It's so centrally managed. It's a great city to test this out. There's very few variables that could go awry in a city like Singapore. Now something extraordinary is starting to happen. People are becoming aware of this. General public is becoming aware of this. They're starting to expect robot vehicles, which is kind of amazing. There are robot vehicle programs underway in more than 20 cities around the world in some form of testing or another. Several U.S. states have robot vehicles being tested. And so the idea has gone from something that was preposterous just 10 years ago, preposterous notion, to now something that we expect. And most Americans, the majority of Americans, expect robot vehicles to be common within 10 years. That's an extraordinary change in a very short time. Something can go from preposterous to normal in 10 years. A lot of people have started to speculate about what we're going to do in these robot vehicles, and that creates a new opportunity for a new kind of digital service. And so as you can see here, this is about connected cars, not just robot vehicles. Most cars that are sold today are connected. Connected cars are cars that have an internet connection of some sort or another. 9 out of 10 cars that are sold are connected today. They're outselling regular cars 9 to 1. The connected car is a platform for services. And as you can see, that figure is expected to grow to about $42 billion by 2022. And that's caused a kind of land grab or gold rush mentality. You see, in the mobile phone business, where companies like Apple and Google have made most of their revenue in the past few years, that's where all the revenue growth for Facebook has come since they went public. That mobile phone industry is starting to tap out. Just about everybody who can own a smartphone has one. Of course, we're going to replace them, but we don't replace them as fast as we used to. It takes about 2 years now to get someone to replace their smartphone. They're pretty expensive, so why would you change it? They're not changing that fast. Sure, we keep adding a few 100 million people a year, but growth has slowed down in the smartphone business. Now, the way we measure revenue in the smartphone industry is ARPU, average revenue per user. But now that's shifting because that's going to slow down. The entire mobile industry is now shifting to something called APRC, which is average revenue per car. So all of a sudden, those auto manufacturers have to deal with the telecom industry and the internet industry as they try to shoehorn their way and elbow their way into that space and grab some of that digital service revenue. And this is going to be an amazing fight to watch. Here's a list of the companies that have a license to put robot vehicles on the road in California, to test out robot vehicles. And you'll see some familiar names. At the very top is Cruise. They're owned by General Motors, so that's GM at the top. And you see Tesla, of course, and you've got BMW there, and Toyota, Mercedes-Benz, Nissan. NVIDIA is a chip company, but they make the chips that are necessary for this, so they're testing out robot vehicles as well. But look at the two that I circled. Look at the two companies that have the second largest and third largest fleets. Apple and Waymo. Waymo is owned by Google. That's the Google robot vehicle company. And actually, they just doubled the size of their fleets. I think now they have the largest fleet in California. These are not automakers. I doubt these companies are going to build cars. I know Google's making them now, but I don't think that's why they're in the game. They're in it for the software, Apple and Google. These companies realize that in the future, just as we've seen in other industries, the value shifts from the physical product to the software inside of it as you network something. The digital network is a value enhancer. Bob Metcalfe told us that 40 years ago. It's true. Every time you network something, the whole value of the network gets better. Every time you add another user to the network, it increases value for everybody on that network. So as you start to network cars, some of the value, some portion of the value in that automobile is going to shift to software, and that's what's in it for Google and for Apple. I think there's an iPhone moment coming. An iPhone moment coming for the auto industry. And by iPhone moment, what I mean is this. Apple makes 92% of the profit in the phone business right now. Before the iPhone, the revenue and the profit in the mobile phone business was shared. There were a lot of companies, Nokia, Ericsson, Motorola. They're all gone now. Apple extracts 92% of the profit in the mobile phone business. And the other 8%, most of that is captured by Samsung. And all of those other companies, ZTE, HTC, all those other three-letter name companies in China that manufacture smartphones, they make negative profits. They lose money on each phone. So Apple absorbs the profit from the smartphone industry. And it reminds me of what happened to the computer industry. The Microsoft and Intel combination, Wintel, absorbed most of the profit out of the hardware business. And they literally devalued the manufacturers of PCs. That became a commodity business. And of course, Google and Apple together have done the same thing to the mobile phone hardware business. A couple of years ago, Apple introduced the smartwatch. And I know all these smart people in New York who are in the fashion business, and they said Apple's going to fail. Boy, did they blow it. Where's Steve Jobs? He never would have released that product. Boy, Tim Cook doesn't know what he's doing. It's over for Apple. They're never going to be successful in the watch business. And I said, how come? What are they doing wrong? They said, well, look at the watch. It's not cool. Well, here it is. They're like, look at the watch. It's not cool. There's nothing stylish. No one's ever going to wear that. Don't you understand? Watches are the one jewelry piece that men will wear. I was like, well, I think Apple probably knows what they're doing. I think they probably have a pretty good idea what they're doing. So I placed a bet with a friend of mine in the fashion business who was certain that Apple would fail. Within 2 years, Apple outsold every watchmaker except for Rolex, and last year they became the largest watchmaker in the world. And by revenue, they now outsell Switzerland. And this is a product that's not even considered a major success for Apple. Now, let's go back to the phone, the car. The way Apple looks at the auto industry is it's a giant rolling smartphone. They just want to slide a wedge of software into that car, and then they can steal all that valuable service revenue on top, and they'll reduce the hardware down to commodity level. And all those automakers that are in love with the leather and the glass and the steering wheel and the metal, they're going to ride that down to commodity pricing. That's why Apple and Google have been so eager to get their software into these cars. And consumers demand it as well. It's not like they're forcing car makers to make this decision. Consumers demand it. We're trying to find ways to hook our phones up to our cars, so we want this. So I think what I'm trying to describe here, the basic concept, if I boil this whole talk down to one sentence, is that software models used to operate on a computer. You can model anything in software. You can model a job or a business process or an entire company on a computer. But in the past, those computer models were confined to a computer. What's happening now is that computer models start to operate in the real world. In the hybrid world, one of the things I talked about was the concept of a digital twin, a perfect digital representation of a physical product or a business, a plant, a process. And this concept of a digital twin that governs how a physical thing works, this concept is catching hold. It's starting to grow. It began with advanced manufacturing of very expensive things like jet engines, but now it's starting to spread through the economy as we start to put sensors in everything. We can start to measure everything. You can start to optimize the usage and do predictive maintenance on real-world things using a software model. Gradually, those software models are going to tell us how best to use those things. The software models start to run the real world. The new rules are being written in software. The rules that govern the world are going to be encoded in software, not written in a rule book. The information economy is shaping the real world. So in summary, these are the points I'm trying to make tonight. Every industry, I believe, contains information. It's an information field. If you can find a way to unlock the information that's embedded in physical products, you can turn that data into a platform for innovation, into a platform for new kinds of apps and services. So the new value bundle in every industry that I see consists of a physical product with embedded software, applications on top of it, and some way to access those apps and change them and control them and pay for them. And when we look at physical products like that, traditional products, whether it's a watch or a car or a hotel room, when we look at it through this lens, we can start to see an opportunity to reimagine a mature category. That allows us to blur the boundaries between what were previously completely separate businesses. And of course, it also allows new entrants to come in and steal some of the revenue from that business. It's time for us to rethink how everything works. What a great time for the imagination. What a fun time to be alive. I'm Robert Tercek. I'm the author of Vaporizes, which was the 2016 International Book of the Year. Thank you for your time and attention. I'm happy to take your questions if there are any.